Real quickly. George, I want to get back to the border in a second, but this is breaking news. Just in the past 2 minutes, a statement by President Trump, 45th president of the United States. These are dark times for our nation as my beautiful home, Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida, is currently under siege, raided and occupied by a large group of FBI agents. Nothing like this has ever happened to a president of the United States before. I know you didn't normally disagree with the president, but FBI agents raiding a former president's home, office, business is unprecedented, right?
I can think of no precedent. However, in order for them to do this, they have had to satisfy some judge that they have probable cause to think that there's important materials pertaining to law enforcement. I have no idea. None of us do at this point. This is, as you say, fast-breaking news. But it is, I think, reasonable to assume that the FBI is not a rogue organization in this case, and that they have a warrant that reflects the satisfaction of a judge, that they know what they're doing.
You know the old line, a good prosecutor, especially a good federal prosecutor, can indict a ham sandwich. So getting search warrants is even a lower bar than that. You said if we believe the FBI effectively to be acting in good faith. There are a lot of Republicans, even relatively sane Republicans and Trump skeptical Republicans, who after the Clinton email investigation and then the Russian collusion investigation and now Hunter Biden's laptop investigation really have sincere questions about just that fact, whether the FBI is a fair, independent, and actor of good faith sans politics.
Yes, exactly. During the Mueller investigation of the so-called Russian collusion, there were, of course, 2 FBI agents who are not only in a romantic relationship, but their text messages back and forth radiated hostility toward Trump. This is the kind of thing a law enforcement agency simply can't put up with. And the FBI has a very determined and very experienced critic in Senator Grassley, a 7-term senator from Iowa, who is a longtime critic and is, I think, when the unraveling of the Hunter Biden story proceeds, as it will do if the Republicans take charge of either house of Congress, there will be an investigation of this. The FBI stands to have its reputation tarnished.
Yeah, Christopher Wray underwent withering questioning by the Judiciary Committee that you mentioned just a couple of days ago. Have you gotten any sense, as you've watched this play out, that there is an understanding within either the FBI or the Justice Department, because you'd have to think that Merrick Garland, the AG, would have signed off on this before you go raid a former president's home? Any understanding of the burden of proof that will be required to overcome the real feelings by people on the right that there is a good faith issue?
I can't answer that. This is what I can say, however. 74 million people voted for Mr. Trump. No matter what you think of Mr. Trump, there's a large number of Americans who look at this and say, that was our choice for president, and he's not being treated very well, which is why there had better be an explanation forthcoming really soon and with considerable detail as to what they're doing down there. It just begins to look at some point. Remember when the Hunter Biden laptop broke, a whole bunch, I think like 50 former national security officials in the federal government rallied around the proposition that this was Russian disinformation. And it began to look to a lot of people, again, people not particularly sympathetic to Mr. Trump, that the Washington establishment, what's called the administrative or deep state, was rallying around one of their own to protect Mr. Biden. So we're going to need a lot of information quickly.
Right. And I'm thinking just the way this plays out. You and I have been in Washington for a while. You were obviously there for a lot longer. That the FBI had to know this was going to leak almost immediately. You can't show up with FBI jackets at Mar-a-Lago and it's not going to leak. That you would have had a rollout on this almost ready to go the second the FBI agent showed up. You hit send on a press release that explains all these things. According at least to what we're seeing, the FBI has just left Mar-a-Lago, so it's happened for a while. And yet we're not seeing any explanation from the DOJ so far. There's no even email sent out ahead of time. Hey, stand by for a DOJ press conference at 7:30 or 8 p.m. with the Attorney General to speak on a matter of importance. Nothing.
There will be. I mean, one thing they've accomplished already is they have sent an electric current through the journalism industry, and it's a big one in the city of Washington. So people are, as we speak, Leland, they are swarming all over this city, not least over the Justice Department building on Constitution Avenue, looking for answers to a question that the government itself has now posed.
I guess, are we to believe that there will be enough skepticism by the journalist establishment in D.C. of this raid itself? And I ask that because there was an enormous amount of acceptance of the Hunter Biden Russian disinformation theme by that very same establishment.
I think the very fact that there has been questions raised about the Hunter Biden laptop and the fact that there is a long history of federal law enforcement being swept up in political passions. The Palmer raids from Attorney General Palmer right after the First World War through the often politicized behavior of the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover when he became too big to fire. There is a long history of suspicion about the neutrality and good administration of the FBI, and this will only quicken those doubts and suspicions.
From here, how long does the Attorney General, because that's really who the FBI works for, have to make some kind of real statement?
Well, poor Merrick Garland was a circuit judge, an appellate judge on the D.C. circuit, and this is deep political waters here, fast-running and turbulent political waters that he is not used to dealing with. No one quite is. That's why you so often have explicitly political people, John Mitchell, Robert Kennedy in the Attorney General's office. I think he will feel considerable pressure, and I don't know, no one knows whether he has sound, savvy, experienced political advisors around him. Politics is a skill. Politics is a learned business, and his learning curve is going to be very steep.
Yeah, this is not even the big leagues. This is the World Series once you raid a former president's private residence with the FBI.
Correct.
Everything becomes political as we think about President Trump, who's sort of trying to revive his image, revive the MAGA coalition, certainly doesn't seem to have control over it in the way that he used to. We were talking earlier today about this, that President Trump built his coalition on being the billionaire who could channel the anger of the common man. That was 2016. Now he is the billionaire who wants the common man to care about his grievances, a la the 2020 election and the big steal, on and on and on. Forget what you think of either of those two things. Does this raid have the potential to somehow galvanize people who may not like Donald Trump, but they like even less the politicalization of the FBI?
What we now may have, breaking as we speak, Leland, is a fresh grievance. Mr. Trump's primary grievance is now 2 years old. It goes back to 2020. If this is not explained promptly, fully, adequately, he is going to go to his people and say, yes, I've got grievances, now I got a new one. And there are millions and millions of people who are prepared to be receptive to this. This is fire that is being played with.
Yeah, I actually almost can't believe it in terms of what we're seeing, of the magnitude of it, in the way that it breaks with a statement from President Trump talking about this. And you can see that no one sees it coming, because as I look through the rest of sort of political Twitter and even inner Washington establishment discussions, it didn't leak beforehand, which seems in and of itself a pretty extraordinary moment. Is there any way that this ends up, I'll ask it in a different way. How does this end up that it is not galvanizing and uniting for Republicans?
It could be divisive for Republicans because some Republicans are probably looking for a reason to put distance between themselves and Mr. Trump, and there are other Republicans who have decided that Mr. Trump is their lifeline and they're going to stick with him. What really alarms me is the sense that Americans have an increasing feeling that the political class is behaving strangely, and that the political class includes not just people elected in office, but politics as a class interest in the entire executive branch apparatus, which is why sometime within the next 24 hours, tomorrow night at this time, we'd better have a whole lot of answers to. Otherwise, we're going to have a rumor mill, and we're going to have people preemptively making judgments about this. That it just feeds the fires in a nation that's already simmering with suspicions.
Yeah, and obviously suspicions, the rumors, the innuendo, and the divisiveness only breeds more when there's less hard facts and there's more time for you and I to fill on cable news. George, it's great to see you. Thank you for playing along through this. We've sort of both responded to this in real time. Thank you. We'll talk soon. Good to see you, sir. As we look at Mar-a-Lago, important to note, the president is not there. He's actually up at his golf course in Bedminster. That's normally where he spends the summers. Mar-a-Lago, though, is where his presidential office is, his post-presidential office that is paid for by taxpayers. It's obviously where he went when he left the White House in 2021. Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.